And in Europe, stocks were lower on Friday as traders monitored fresh economic data and digested a report that raised doubts over a possible coronavirus treatment. Let's talk to Chelsea Delany at the Frankfurt Stock Exchange for more from the European scene. Good afternoon, Chelsea. So on Thursday, EU leaders made progress on a joint recovery fund to help offset economic impacts of coronavirus, but actually failed to reach an overall agreement. How are the markets reacting to this?
There's certainly a bit of disappointment today. Expectations going into this meeting were, quite low, just because there's been so much derision within the EU over the past several weeks about what this joint economic response should be. But we had seen some softening of tones, particularly on the behalf of Germany. Yesterday, Chancellor Angela Merkel basically pledged that Germany would be willing to up its budget contributions to the EU budget to sort of help out some of the poorer nations in Europe. So there had been some hope that Germany taking some steps forward would help other fiscally conservative European countries like the Netherlands that have been opposed to contributing more to the EU. It would sort of help sway them. It doesn't appear that that's going to be happening, and really all we saw yesterday out of this this council meeting was just how deep these divisions within the EU that have really been around for a decade now really lie. And I think this is certainly causing some concern for investors, especially as we continue to get a slew of really unprecedented economic data really suggesting an unprecedented collapse in the European economy at this point. So there's certainly a lot of pressure on these European leaders, but the next step is that they're going to task the EU Council with coming up with some sort of proposal for a long-term recovery fund. This could be something around 1 trillion, 1.5 trillion euros, but they have agreed to take the first step to doing that, but they have worked out pretty much no other details of what this is going to look like and what how it could be structured. So there's really a lot more work to go, and at the same time, the economic situation is getting increasingly dire here in Europe.
And some not so good news now. The number of coronavirus cases and deaths in Germany is on the rise again as the economy slowly reopens. Could a second wave of infections be coming?
This is certainly a concern. We've heard this voiced by a number of public health officials and also political leaders here in Germany over the past few days. Germany had really gotten a reputation and a lot of praise internationally for the steps it took to contain the virus and how it sort of handled testing and not allowing the hospital system to be overwhelmed. It's also been one of the first to take big steps to reopen the economy, and this is creating a lot of concern. Angela Merkel talked yesterday about her deep concern that some states within Germany are being too aggressive. And we've also had public health officials warning that a second wave could be on the way. We're not seeing a huge increase at this point. We have seen the number of cases and deaths tick up. At this point, it's not a spike, but as people are sort of returning to everyday life, as shops are reopening here in Germany, it does raise the risk that more cases will be on the way. And given Germany's role as a leader in coronavirus containment, if they do see a spike here, if we do see reopening measures having to be taken back, that could certainly send a signal to the rest of the world.
Now, take us through some of the earnings reports out of Europe. Now, we know that Germany's Lufthansa reported a 1.2 billion euro loss, but Swiss food giant Nestle said that sales are surging. What are investors making of this report?
Well, there's certainly a lot of different narratives coming through from corporate earnings right now in Europe. Most of these are pretty grim. Lufthansa, which has obviously just been devastated by travel lockdowns and just the complete disappearance of the travel sector right now. They've had to ground the majority of their flights, and they're saying now that they will not survive unless they get government government help. They're hoping to finalize this in the days ahead, but they're seeking about 10 billion euros. At the same time, they are quickly running out of cash. And Lufthansa had been seen as one of the least vulnerable to coronavirus because they had a pretty strong balance sheet and they had a lot of assets that they could tap for loans. And now it's seeming like that's not really helping them at all. So that's certainly a worrying sign for other airlines. At the same time, we are seeing a few, if you can call them bright spots, I'm not sure, but a few bright spots in the corporate sector, particularly in the packaged food industry. We talked earlier this week about Danone, the French company. They make things like yogurt, but also today Nestle, which makes a lot of different frozen foods, a lot of different packaged foods, is saying they saw a really big increase in sales this year in the first quarter, in part because of the flood of people we're seeing at the grocery store. And they are one of the few companies that has actually held their profit forecast for 2020. So they're saying that they're actually holding up quite well. But these are very small bright spots in what's generally a very grim economic outlook right now.
Thanks, Chelsea. Do enjoy your weekend. We'll cross over to the commodities market segment when we return in just a moment. Please stay with us.